Hello, and welcome to the third installment of Healthcare Marketing Pulse. Healthcare Marketing Pulse is a five-part webinar series for healthcare marketers from the digital marketing experts at Fathom. Today's session is going to focus on maximizing marketing resources, and it's informed by our work with top hospital systems. My name is Joe Adams. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Fathom, and I will be the moderator today. Before we dive into the content and I hand it off to our experts, I want to share a couple housekeeping items. First and foremost, thank you for your interest in today's session. We really appreciate you joining us today. Second, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A functionality. You'll find the Q&A feature in the middle of the Zoom bar. And if you can't see it there, hit the three more option dots and it'll be in that menu. We're going to answer all questions at the end of today's session, so please don't be alarmed if we don't answer yours in the moment. Finally, if you want to go deeper on a subject with our experts, please raise your hand, whether that's through the Q&A functionality or by raising your hand in the webinar. We'll make sure to take note of your interest and curiosity, and we'll follow up later to schedule some time to chat. With that, I'd like to introduce our host today. Our host is Jeremy Mathis. Jeremy is Fathom's Vice President of Client Success. He leads our account management, strategy, and project management functions. Jeremy's got deep experience and expertise in healthcare, thanks to the time he spent not only at Fathom, but on health system marketing teams as well. In addition to leading the client success team at Fathom, Jeremy provides peer-level support to CMOs and VPs at many of our top healthcare client organizations. Jeremy.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you all for joining us. I'm really excited to dive into the topic today, one that I know we are all facing as healthcare marketers. And to be honest, it's probably a phrase we're all tired of hearing, especially over these last few years with just increasing economic pressure. And that is do more with less. Right. So I am excited to introduce you to two of my colleagues here today. We're going to talk a little bit deeper on how we help support a lot of our healthcare partners in working with the constrained budgets in order to make sure that we are delivering the results that we're looking for. So up first, we're going to hear from Elise Horst. Elise is our Director of AI Solutions. And then after that, we'll hear from Claire. Claire is our Director of Paid Media. But before I dive in, I really want to go ahead and set the stage a little bit for some of the factors that are at play affecting us as healthcare marketers. We know that the economic pressures that we've all been facing, everything from rising costs of goods and services, labor shortages, have all really impacted the bottom line. And because of that, we saw a recent CMO survey that shows just about 80% of us in healthcare marketing are working with reduced budgets from where we were previously due to those inflationary pressures and economic factors at play. Beyond that, we know that our competitive landscape is continuing to shift. So just recently, Amazon entered the space through a purchase of One Medical, and they are offering now either a subscription or a per fee basis, virtual health visit. We also know that there's been a number of others in the retail space that have entered the healthcare marketing industry. So CVS, Walgreens, Walmart have all had significant investment in the space. But I think now a lot are reevaluating, right, and maybe refocusing what role they're going to play in the space. So that landscape is going to continue to evolve and will require us to be even more agile as we move ahead in the future. Beyond that, we know that consumer behavior is also continuing to change. And we saw this accelerate quite a bit during the pandemic, where there was a really skyrocketing adoption of telehealth, virtual health options. But even beyond that, just a shift in how consumers are, interacting with data and information online. And, we continue to see that go up as we look at people interacting with information online. We also know that there is a big opportunity for us in healthcare marketing to take a greater advantage of that. So making sure that we are putting our dollars, our resources, where our prospective patients and our consumers are already interacting with digital media. And lastly, we know that our tool set is changing. So tactics and even platforms that we have used, even a few years ago may no longer be at our disposal as things have shifted due to regulatory changes. The OCR bulletin, I know, impacted a lot of what we can do as far as how we can identify, how we can target various prospective patients, and how we can provide the best possible experience for them online, right? And that is an ongoing, changing every day scenario. And I know we covered this quite a bit in our last session here on the Healthcare Marketing Pulse. If you missed that, very, very informative. That is available on our website. You can go and check that out to take a look at that recording. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? Despite all these factors, we know that growth is possible, right? It's just a matter of finding the right place to look. And so I want to bring in Claire and Elise now to talk a little bit more in depth on how we partner with our healthcare partners. So up front, Elise, I'd love to maybe have you kick us off here and talk a little bit about setting clear goals and how important it is to have a very strong objective up front. And then also maybe if you can tell us a little bit about how we understand our investments, again, making sure that we are allocating the limited resources that we have in the best possible place.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. Like Jeremy mentioned, I think we're all in a situation where our resources are limited, but that doesn't necessarily change what's expected of us as healthcare marketers and what we contribute to our organizations. So we're working on constrained resources, but more is expected. And so how do we make sure that we are setting ourselves up and our organizations up for success? And that really starts with setting a clear goal so that we can all have alignment around what we think is reasonable for us to achieve and in what ways we're supporting the organization. This also helps make sure that we're guiding our budget decisions later on and tying them back to our goal to make sure that the dollars that we're spending are being used as effectively as possible. And then it also sets us up for success as we manage performance along the way to make sure that we have something to turn back to and make sure that it all ladders up to the very important goals that our organization set for us. So just a couple of examples here on the screen, things that our clients and healthcare partners often are tasked with, things like increasing NRC scores for key service lines, growing patient volume, and just some ways that you might break that down from a marketing standpoint to make it something that you as a marketer can measure your contribution to. So tracking those NRC preference scores, for example, or tracking the number of inquiries or new patient visits that you're driving from your marketing efforts. Those are all great ways to help ladder up to those business level goals and kind of justify and prove out the investment that you've made from a marketing standpoint. And in addition to that, while setting the goal, as if that's not complex enough, there are a lot of other complexities that lie beneath those goals that we have to consider and make sure that we're factoring into our decisions. Things like operational readiness and making sure that the marketing programs we're putting in place are not creating headache down the road for folks like our friends at the call centers and other operational partners that make what we do in marketing possible from a patient standpoint. So making sure that we're factoring those things in before we launch something or invest those dollars in a certain way. And then we're also thinking about content. I know that this is a constraint that we often run into ourselves and with a lot of our clients just around the amount of content that they have available to support the marketing journey. So really being mindful of that and understanding what that looks like on the upfront and also what budget might be available or required to build out a set of content if it doesn't already exist. That's definitely something you'd want to factor in to your marketing efforts in alignment with that goal. So trying to take advantage of what exists as much as possible and then planning really strategically for what you need in addition to that to make sure that you have everything you need to achieve the goals that you've set for yourself. So once you have a goal in place, I think that at one point in time, that was probably the hardest part was figuring out the goal and getting there. And I think now there's additional level of complexity and scrutiny around, well, what investment do you need to achieve that goal? And we kind of are being tasked with proving that out at the upfront in order to justify and get that investment. So some things that you might consider, especially if you're in a zero-based marketing world where you're really kind of starting from scratch and you don't have the luxury of just kind of falling back on the budget that you had last year. Really considering all of the things that you see on the screen here as a way to not only make sure that the investment that you're requesting is realistic, but also that there's efficacy behind it and that it's set up for success and it has the potential to meet the goal. So things like access, which is super simple, but also very complex, making sure that there is capacity for any of the patients that you may drive through your marketing efforts, setting up measurable growth goals like we talked about to make sure that you're able to show the value of the investment that you've secured, and thinking ahead to the next year, that would really be beneficial to have in your back pocket as you go to make those budget requests again. And then making sure that the audience is really defined, which is something that Claire will talk more about in terms of activation, but being able to clearly state who we're targeting and why is more important than ever because we don't have the budget available to just sort of target anyone and everyone in our area. So being really clear about what that looks like and why certain audiences are important and how we can target them is very valuable. And then also from a reputation standpoint, I know this makes up a lot of goals, especially tied to more awareness efforts or areas where we face a lot of competition. Having a clear sense of where your preference score sits today and where you'd like it to be is also something else that you can monitor to help kind of understand the value of the media that you have in market. And then we kind of already talked about the operational workflow, but being really mindful of what that lead capture experience looks like, not just from a user experience standpoint, but also operationally on the back end. So you know what's happening to those form fills once they come through from a marketing campaign and get to the landing page and take that action, having purview into kind of where they go next so that that also informs your ability to measure that and follow that patient through their journey, as well as just making sure that everything's buttoned up operationally so you're not losing out on any of that demand that you've driven to that landing page. And then lastly, once you get your budget secured and have your goals in place, figuring out what the best way to activate on that can also kind of feel overwhelming. There are so many options available to us, so many channels and audience targeting tactics that it can be hard to really hone in on what's going to be most successful for you. So we follow this media planning approach internally at Fathom and with our partners that we work with in the healthcare space. And the goal is really to get from your business goal to a marketing activation plan. So how do we deploy the right tactics and audiences and creatives in support of that business goal that you've been charged with supporting from a marketing standpoint? So that looks like a kind of a three-step process at its highest level, where we start with some deep research, both internally and with our clients, to really identify what the market looks like, what factors might contribute to our ability to be successful outside of just what we know about the service line or the area that we're supporting, and really making sure that we have a deep understanding of what the landscape looks like, both from a goal standpoint, but also what the patient journey looks like, what the competitive space looks like, all of those things that kind of come together to inform our media plans. And then we have a wide range of experts here internally at Fathom across social, programmatic, video, search. And we tap all of those individuals to help us come up with the best ways to reach the target audience that we've identified across channels. So we're definitely, like Claire mentioned, earlier, we're talking about kind of maximizing the output at the innermost part of the marketing funnel. So if you think about using paid search to really capture demand and then going outwards, we have experts that can kind of support that full journey and really think about that from a media planning standpoint to make sure that our media plan accomplishes the goal first and foremost, and then kind of layers on additional. And then we also consider what creative is needed to make good on that. So making sure that we have the assets in place to support the ad formats that we're going to use. And then also anticipating measurement needs. So that's something that we like to consider at the upfront before we launch a campaign. What do we need to have in place so that when we get to the end of the flight, we're able to successfully measure it and we're not waiting to kind of figure that out and then try to pull data together that does or doesn't support a certain story. So having a clear plan in place and really partnering internally with your analytics team is helpful to make sure that we're all on the same page and can collaborate when the time comes to make sure that we can effectively measure our campaign. And then lastly, so once you have researched everything, you've explored all the channels available to you, you might still be left with a pretty wide list of things that you could potentially activate on from a media standpoint. So really being strategic and looking through what all those options are that are available to you and trying to select what you feel might be most successful, even if that means that you're going to test a couple of things with the expectation that you will eventually narrow down your strategy into what's most successful. There are a lot of options available to us. So, really making sure that we're looking at the tactics that are available and making sure that they fit within our budget recommendations, that the targeting is super applicable, that the performance that we estimate that those drive are on track with the goal that we've set, and that we're all aligned as to what this plan or is expected to net for us from a performance standpoint. So all of those three things combined are a really helpful way for us to get from this is our business goal, these are the dollars we have available, to actually here's how we'll activate on it from a media standpoint in a really concise way.
Thanks, Elise. Claire, wondering if you can jump in here and take us through, once we have goals in place and we have our budget allocated, where do we go from here? How do we find the right media mix, and what's Fathom's approach to taking a look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Elise has brought up a lot of really good considerations for when you're trying to do more with less and where to start when you have the entire landscape of digital media available to you. So we are all very familiar with the traditional marketing funnel that starts with awareness at the top and zooms in all the way down to acquisition and conversion at the bottom. But when you are working with a zero-based budget and budget is a constraint, you might consider a different visual for how you plan your media and introduce this target visual. So for a lot of our healthcare partners, we like to think about what can we do with these dollars to be most efficient at the bottom of the funnel first, and then move our way out to things like programmatic and traditional media. So paid search is one of our most tried and true tactics that sits at that center of the target. It's conversion ready, it's existing demand, where we know that demand already exists. And for some service lines, there's almost unlimited demand, right? Primary care is always going to have really high volume of demand at the center of the target, versus transplant might not always have that significant volume of demand, and you might have to supplement more quickly. But this is a great example of how you can plan your media by service line based on what you know about your market and doing that research that Elise alluded to on the last slide, talking about how can we capture our conversion ready audience and then move our way out to scale as we need based on things like capacity and availability, and are my patients that I'm driving going to be able to see a doctor within 30 days? So we really like this visual for after we've done our research and we know what our measurement plan is going to be, we think about what is the available demand that we can capture and how can we start there. Specifically talking about paid search is a great way to capture your existing audience, but even paid search can be broad depending on how you're executing it. So not only do we think about how our paid search strategy is one of our first that we like to activate for our clients who have budget constraints, but it's also something that you can narrow down within the channel itself. So this is something that we've been thinking about more and more, especially since we removed tracking for our healthcare clients about 2 years ago based on the OCR bulletin reaction. So we can no longer see within our paid search platforms what's converting, and the algorithms are no longer getting that second by second feedback data from our Google ads, and we're not getting that same type of algorithmic optimization that we're used to. So over the last 2 years, we've had to come up with a new approach to optimization specifically for our healthcare clients to make sure that paid search is hitting the mark and is as effective as possible for your results. So a few of those things that make up the most efficient and effective paid search strategy are keyword lead analysis, match type tests, and negating search terms. So for keyword lead analysis, if you have really nice clean data where you're getting back that keyword level that drove a lead, what you can do is manually review those keywords and look back at your search strategies and compare and contrast, saying how much have I spent on this keyword versus how much value is it driving me compared to my total percentage of leads. Not to steal some thunder from some future sessions, but this is definitely a place that AI can plug in and make it a lot less manual. Another opportunity and optimization we do is match type tests. So without that algorithmic data feeding back into your paid search platform, match types can get really crazy. And you might be getting matching for search terms that are just not relevant to what you're trying to activate on. And so this is where you can test really broad match types to constrain match types based on what the keyword and the search intent is. And then, of course, even when we had algorithmic feedback loops, negating search terms is really important. What don't you want to show up for? What is similar to your service line, but not necessarily what you want to search for? So an example could be a breast cancer campaign that's not necessarily funded from the same place as a mammography campaign. Those things are very closely related, and so that can be a great way to implement negative keywords. Now, all of this to say, it takes a lot of attention and detail and refinement, especially now that we've lost some of those automated signals, but it's so important, especially when this strategy sits at the bottom and the center of your entire marketing funnel and might be one of those first places that you're looking to fund. So then there's programmatic. So let's say that you have the most chef's kiss paid search strategy. It's optimized, it's fine-tuned. You're just making little tweaks here and there, and you're still have capacity in your service line. So that is a signal that this is an opportunity to scale. Before going out and targeting just by geography, age, demographic, there is an opportunity to actually target by people who are likely to or might already have an existing condition that's relevant to your service line. And what is great about programmatic is you can actually activate really refined and targeted audience strategies, but with scale that you're not going to find in something like paid search. And so this is a mid-funnel or that mid-ring when you think about the target visual that we had earlier that really introduces scale, but while also maintaining that audience targeting that we see a lot of success for our clients. And we also see strategies like this influencing the bottom of the funnel with paid search, organic, and direct lead volume.
Right. Thanks, Claire. As we wrap up the presentation portion of today's session, I want to leave you all with 3 key takeaways. So we heard from Elise and Claire a few things that I think should help all of us be a little more optimized with the limited resources that we have available to us today. So up front, as we know, as all good marketers do, right, we need to set clear goals. So not only looking at specific goals of campaigns, but making sure that overall as a marketing function, our goals and what we're measuring are aligned to organizational priorities and operational readiness, as Elise mentioned. And when we're ready to plan, let's make sure, again, we have a very clearly defined objective so we can measure where we are, where we need to refine and update our strategies. From there, the second piece that's really important for us is really understanding the investments that we're making. We want to eliminate some of that waste. We want to make sure that we are putting funds and resources in the best possible channels and areas that are going to net the best return. I know all of us are feeling more pressure now than ever on showing a return for our investments. And so we want to make sure that we are making the case for our investments during our planning session and really then looking at diversifying some of those resources so that our media plan is thorough and agile enough to shift and meet the needs of our audiences. And lastly, what Claire just talked about, we will really want to advertise with precision, right? It's important, as I mentioned, to eliminate a lot of that waste that we might see in some of our media plans of prior years. Really, really tailor and focus it in on what are we trying to do, who are we trying to reach, to make sure that we are really getting the most bang for our buck. And so, as Claire mentioned, prioritizing those conversion-ready channels like paid search. So we really want to, if there's existing demand in the market and we have capacity, let's take advantage of that. Let's fund paid search right off the bat. From there, utilizing channels like Programmatic to really scale our investment and reach targeted audiences to help generate some additional demand to fuel some of that growth that we're looking for. So that'll end the presentation for today. But Joe, I do believe we have time for Q&A, and I think I did see a few questions come through the chat.
That's right. We do have a couple questions and a few minutes left. And so if any attendees would like to submit questions, happy to field those over the course of the next few minutes. Claire, let's start with a question for you. How can healthcare organizations shift media mix from traditional to digital first, while ensuring that we're not losing any of the success that we've seen or missing out on return that the system is expecting?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and definitely something that we're contending with on the day-to-day. I think that, of course, starting at a sound bottom of the funnel strategy, like I was talking about, is the place to go. But sometimes when you're moving traditional dollars into digital, people still, or stakeholders still have the things that they're accustomed to seeing, like billboards, TV ads, radio, and sometimes seeing is believing when it comes to some of our healthcare stakeholders. So we definitely have digital strategies that can be direct pivots that feel very similar to traditional, that actually are going to be much more relevant to your audience and targeted and drive hopefully better results than what you were seeing before. So an alternative to linear television, where you already have a spot and a creative already slated, is CTV or YouTube TV, and where you can layer on some of that programmatic targeting that I was talking about before. So if you want to take your TV spot and actually show it to people who might have AFib, then that's an opportunity that you would never be able to have with TV. Same for terrestrial radio. You already have the spot, or at least the script, that can easily be pivoted to Spotify, SiriusXM, Pandora, and streaming radio. And then, of course, programmatic is a great alternative to out of home, but we even do some digital out of home that we can run programmatically with not exactly the same level of targeting. But if you wanted to have that scale and still have some out of home, we have really great digital out of home options that we use for our healthcare clients.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Elise, this next question is for you. This person must have seen your title and had a curiosity. So an attendee asked, what are some practical examples of how AI can be integrated, be leveraged in our marketing efforts to drive growth, knowing that budgets aren't as big as we'd hope they'd be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know Claire talked a lot about different ways to personalize your media mix and the targeting that you're using. And I think that begs the question around if the same sort of generalized creative that we have accessible to us is going to cut it if we're targeting a really specific audience. And I know that creative can be really costly, especially from a video standpoint, to produce. So sometimes that's a limitation where we might want to run a certain channel or for a certain duration, and we just don't feel like we have the creative to support it. And I think AI has already started to change the game in that regard, and definitely definitely over the next couple of years, the capabilities will advance so much. You'll be able to really create content at scale to make it feel really personalized and meaningful to the targeted audiences that you're reaching in a way that is cost effective for your organization and doesn't require the resources that it would today to create so many variations of creative. And then Claire teased it too. I think that there's a lot of opportunity from an optimization standpoint and even kind of a baseline analysis. AI can really be a partner to you in terms of completing some of those more execution level tasks and reviewing keywords and performance data to help you continue to improve your campaigns. Armed with your strategic mindset and the knowledge that you have about your service line, AI can really be a partner to help take some of that work off your plate so that you can continue to focus on those really strategic initiatives.
Thank you, Elise. Jeremy, that appears to be the extent of the questions we received during today's session. What can we expect in the rest of the series?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you all for joining, taking a little bit of time out of your day to hear from us and to share some of your questions and thoughts on the doing more with less that we're all faced with. I want to let you know about 2 more sessions that are coming up to round out our Healthcare Marketing Pulse series. Both of these in August are going to be focused on AI, right? So I know we at least got a question earlier. I know this is a hot topic for a lot of our healthcare partners. So on August 8th, we're going to do an introduction to AI for healthcare marketing, giving you a broad overview of where it can be used, what tools are available, how to do it safely and responsibly. And then 2 weeks later, on August 22nd, we're going to go 2 or 3 levels deeper and really showing in a true application of AI. We'll share use cases, examples of where we're seeing it work already for our partners to really give you some actionable takeaways for how you might be able to leverage AI if you're not already in your marketing mix. So once again, thank you all for joining. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you again at these upcoming sessions.